Alrighty, today making some drums. Got some feedback from a friend, said I should actually put the product at the beginning. So now I'm gonna switch back to 40 minutes ago and you can listen to it in real time. Alrighty. Hey, it's Griff. I'm gonna try to do another tutorial tonight. As always with these things, I just kind of start talking and I don't necessarily know where I'm going, so, kind of bear with me. I don't do much editing. I decided the last video that I made was on sound design and renoise, and it seemed to have gone over pretty well. So I'm going to try to do another one here, this time covering the creation of drums in renoise using the modular type design approach that I discussed in my last video. So I'm going to start off by making a kick drum, and then I'll probably move on to a hi-hat, maybe something resembling a snare or a clap. The actual sound design involved in the clap and the snare I'm not super familiar with, so I'm just going to try to make something that sounds kind of neat. I'll probably sequence a little beat with it and call it a night at that. I'm hoping that this video doesn't go over an hour, but if it does, I'll try to put in some timestamps into where I start certain bits. So if you're looking for a primer on, or a primer, I always say primer, on renoise modular type synthesis, watch the last video. I'm not going to cover too much of that, so I'm just going to kind of pick up where I left off. And that is, well, with a blank project. I'm going to start by creating a one sample long high DC offset sample. And I'm going to start by creating this a kick drum. And the way that we create a kick drum usually is to start with an oscillator and then start modulating it high and then fall off to a lower frequency. And then usually add a pop, like a transient at the top. So let's give that a shot. So I have this waveform in. For now, I'm just going to drop in an HDSR envelope, and we'll bring the decay, the sustain, all the way down. The release, I don't want to deal with like release. We'll kind of play around with the delay to get the sound that we want. So let's bring the attack back a little bit, and let's start dropping in some of our effects. So I'm going to start with a send track. I'm going to follow the same kind of basic split design pattern, split and recombine design pattern that I used before. I don't actually know if that's optimal, but it's what I do. So we'll call this split. Let's make another. We'll have one of the effects chains for the low note. That's like our oscillator that we can tune. And then I'll have another one here for impulse. And then we'll add another one for combine. And just to kind of get the signal flow going, I'm going to drop in a few sends. I'm going to send from split to low note. Then I'm going to drop in another send from split to impulse. And I'm going to keep the source on both of these and then mute the FX track for split. What this is going to do is anything that's coming into split will then be sent out to both low note and impulse simultaneously. Oh my goodness. All right, well, this is why you replace the batteries in your mouse before you get started. I will be right back. Alrighty, just paused the video, replaced the batteries in my mouse, and we're good to go. So anyway, where was I? We're gonna split the audio here, send it to both low note and impulse, and we'll add a send track into each one of these guys here, which we'll send to combine. And because both of these are just going to add together, we could probably keep mute source on that. Oh, the other thing we want to do is make sure we turn off apply post mixer volume and pan. I said it in the last video, I'm still not entirely sure what value that has. If you know, please leave a comment or let me know, send a message I mean, I know what it does, right? Like it tells you what it does. I just don't know what value it adds to using it. Anyway, because I'm not planning on chaining many of these sends together yet, I'm just going to keep these muted here. And then we'll go to combine. Oh, right. As I was saying, because we're just adding these together, I'm actually going to reduce the send amount by a few dB. We'll bring it down by about -6. And then combine them together here as the output. So enough routing. Let's actually start to add some stuff in here. So the first thing we want to probably add in is a oscillator. So let's add in a ring mod. So I kind of did a lot of stuff out of order there. You might wonder how I arrived at such a percussive sound right away. Let me just cover this modulation first. This is modulating. This is an envelope which at every sample will be multiplying our input waveform. Our input waveform is just a maximum like positive value here. And when I press the key, at every time point t on this x-axis here, it multiplies from 0 to 1 and then back to 0 again. So that is actually going to change the amplitude of our signal. And you'll notice that as I change this value here, you can see more or less note. So another thing you'll notice in the tracks here is that the signal never goes below 0. And this is actually something that I failed to address in my last video, but when you add a ring modulator, it doesn't, when you multiply a bias offset value here, the ring modulator multiplies it by a sine wave, but it will never become negative valued, right? Like we would need to put in a negative DC offset in order to get the sine wave to go below the 0 point here. Let me just actually change that so you can see what I'm talking about. So you see how in the master track here and in track 1, let me just change this to be scopes. Actually, that might help a little bit. Scopes, show scopes. There we go. So you'll see how it's all positive, all positive. Now if I change the waveform so that it's all negative here, now it's all negative, negative, negative. This is not what we want. Obviously, you might think, oh, let's just put it at 0. Well, that's not going to get us anything because this is 0 now. So I find that the best way to... Are you serious? Did I lose my mouse again? Come on. Come on. This is redonkulous. Hello. All right, there we go. It's back. All right, so I find that the best way to deal with this is to apply a DC offset device. And if you turn on auto DC, it basically applies a high pass filter to a window in the past of like in the last few seconds, and it tries to bring it back to a 0 DC. So now when I play this sine wave, I guess you don't really see it. Well, if I increase the time that this spends on... Wait, seriously? What's happening here? C4, auto DC, mute source, combine. All right. Well, whatever. I'll toss this in combine. It shouldn't make a difference, but there it is. So see what happens when I turn on and off auto DC? One of them is positive, and then the other one has zero value here. So, yeah. Let's bring that back. So that's already a pretty percussive sound, but we want to modulate the frequency. Sorry if you guys hear anything out my back window. I live next to a hospital, and there are constantly sounds. Anyway, oh my god. Okay, well, we're just going to keep going. The next thing that I want to do here is modulate the frequency on this ring mod. So I'm going to add in a velocity tracker. And I'm just going to use this to re-trigger an LFO. And that LFO is going to have I'm going to put the LFO after the velocity tracker. You can't send destination things backwards in an effects chain. That's just another optimization that Renoise has made. So we're going to send the velocity tracker to the LFO reset, and we're going to have this destination min and max 0 correspond to a reset of, well, anything, any velocity that is input into this device, which is basically any time that we're playing this instrument. It will send a 0 no matter what the value is to reset. And we're going to do custom, and you'll see that the 0 resets it to value 0 here in the waveform editor. If I change this to, let's say, 32, and I change this to 32, right? Now, when I press the button, it resets not to 32, but resets. I'm pretty sure that the maximum value here is 255, so this is 255 on this side, and this is halfway, right? So you'll see that it resets the LFO to halfway on that envelope. So if I bring this back to 0, it now resets to here. So let's bring, well, actually, let's first of all connect the ring mod note. Ooh. This is an interesting thing that I hadn't even considered. The new ring mod in Renoise 3.1 does not have an analog frequency value, right? So it actually is discretized into notes on the scale. This is nice if you're trying to build a synthesizer, something that you want to have some sort of tonality to it. I'm going to turn on one shot here. Anyway, it's nice if you're trying to build something that you can play like a keyboard, but it's not so nice if you're trying to make this sound. So instead of connecting this to the note, I'm going to connect this to the transpose. The transpose is largely an analog value. And I'm going to set the root note to be, let's just set this to be like C3. So now you'll notice that when I press the key on the keyboard, the transpose value goes positive, and then it comes back down following this envelope here. So I'm just going to maximize the amplitude, and let's change the frequency up so that this line plays through this track quicker. Here, so we'll increase that. Hey, that's starting to sound like a kick drum. How about that? We can change the bass note if we want to. I'm just going to stick with C3 for now. So let's see, what does that get us here? We can change the frequency, or the time at which, the time over which that note transitions from its high value to its low value. But if we don't also change the time here, we won't hear it. So, all right, let's start talking about macros. What's going to be useful in a kick instrument? I'm going to hit this button to bring down macros. I think we would want to have one of these assigned to the decay here. And we definitely don't want a 60-second decay on our kick drum. So let's go from a minimum of 0 to a maximum of like 1 second. Is that way too short? We might want something longer than that. Let's do it like 5 seconds. How about that? Yeah, that's a lot. And I also think, let's just call this on time. I don't know if that's a good name for it, but that's what I'm going to call it. We might also want to assign, I guess we can't really. Oh, okay. So one of the things here, I would like to assign this point to a value on the macro, right? So that if I can independently adjust this to transition very quickly or very slowly. And you can't actually assign a value here to a slider up here. But what we can do is we can max this out and then we can adjust the frequency. This is just the speed at which the LFO plays through this envelope. And I think that that's a really good thing. So I'm going to I'm going to try to connect these two things together, on time and this frequency thing here. We need to invert the values here, right? Because if I close this, that's starting to sound really good already. But I kind of want this frequency to do the opposite thing. If this is at a low value here, I want this transition to go very, very quickly. And if this is at a high value here, I want this transition to go very slowly, so that I match the envelope here. So I'm going to assign that. I'm just going to flip these values. 1 loop per second, and then to infinity. Just doesn't change. Some of these values don't make a whole lot of sense. You know what? I think I don't want to tie these two things together, actually, because I can think of a reason why we might want to play with those things individually. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. We're going to go to a second macro here, and we'll assign this value. Where is this here? Mapping of frequency. We'll go from 1 to negative infinity. So now we can control these things differently. So I'm going to call this frequency fall, and I'm going to call this amplitude fall, which is an awful name for anyone who doesn't know exactly what this thing's doing, but so now we can make really long sounding kicks. Oh, that's going to be so dirty. Cool. Right. What's next? Let's add an impulse to this. So how do we do an impulse? Let's add some noise for an impulse. So one of the things that I'm going to be using tonight a few times is called the lo-fi mat. This is a bit crusher usually, but the way that we're going to use it today is a little bit different. So I'm actually going to mute this track here. How do we do that? I guess I'm just going to not send anything, and I'm going to have this down to 0. Also, why is this off? That's weird. Did I turn that off on purpose? Huh, weird. Right. So I want that on, but now I want to not listen to it for now, because I'm already sending it. I guess I'll turn it off for now. Okay, so now all what we're listening to is the impulse. And I'll turn off this lo-fi mat. This is just our bass input here. Right. Lo-fi mat. Lo-fi mat is usually a bit crusher. It does really cool things to drum samples especially. But today we're actually just going to use it as a noise generator. Turns out if you put a DC offset into the lo-fi mat, and I'm just going to put this all the way up to 16-bit. We don't want to do any bit crunching. We'll just keep the rate as high as we possibly can. But we turn on the noise, and we get a noise generator. How about that? It's just for free. I would like to adjust the snappiness of this, though, because we don't want... I'm just going to turn on the low note for a second. This is actually not a bad snare. Like, we could play with this and turn this into a snare. In fact, that's actually how I'm going to create the snare later, but I would like this to just be a click. I don't want this envelope associated with this. So let's get out a gainer here on this effect here, and we'll put this after. And let's get out another velocity tracker. And I'm now going to run my velocity tracker into my gainer here. So, oh wait, that's dumb. Why would I do that? Well, I can think of reasons why, but I'm just going to do the same trick that I did before. We'll go from the velocity tracker to this LFO, reset, Put in a custom envelope. We'll run this out to the lo-fi mat. Let's do wet mix. Okay, we got stuff going on there. Actually, that's interesting. I didn't think I could do that. Let's put this here. Oh, wait. Maybe I don't need the gainer, right? Because I don't need to use the gainer as a VCA, which is a voltage-controlled amplifier, if I can just use the wet mix knob on the lo-fi mat itself. So I'm going to turn the amplitude all the way up. So this is a little weird. I don't know what that was all about, but... Oh, I do know what that was all about. We need to set this to 0 so that it always resets to 0. So that's a nice impulse. Except I'm going to bring that down. Okay, so I'm going to add another knob here for impulse. And we're going to change this frequency value from negative infinity to, well, 37 maybe? Is that a good one? No, we need to change that. There we go. Let's bring it up to like 2. Now let's bring it down to 4. That's a lot of impulse. Maybe I should inverse this. Yeah, I'm going to inverse this so that it's min, it's 1 LPC, and at its max, I'm actually going to change this to like 6 LPC. Why not? So, this will be the impulse, and now as we bring this up, we'll get more or less impulse. I'm going to bring that tighter, actually. Is that what we want? It might work. So I can play with the color of the sound using this rate. I'm going to stick with that for now, right around 2060 hertz. So we have our impulse, we have our low note, and in the combine, we basically have a basic kick drum. I'm going to EQ it a little bit, just because I don't think it sounds very convincing right now, but this is all about, like, you might want to try to recreate a very accurate sounding kick drum. You might want something that sounds like an 808. You might want something that sounds really dirty and distorted. Like, this is kind of up to you. Since this is my channel, I'm going to make a kick drum that I think sounds cool. Maybe not a kick drum that is super accurate, okay? But it's what I might want to make. So this EQ here, I'm just going to play around with it until I get something I like. Okay, I don't like the EQ. Let's apply an analog filter. It's the answer to life's everything. Ooh, I like that. Just turn the drive up on everything, and it's just amazing. I think I'm actually just going to apply the EQ directly to the impulse. And another thing we might want to do is apply a compressor to it. I'm just going to try this. This usually doesn't work out that well for me. I'm not that good at compressing drums. Something I should learn a little bit more about. So bring the threshold down to something that matters. Bring the release back quite a bit. Oh, that's weird. Why is that? Oh well. Bring the ratio up. Bring the attack back. Hold up. That's weird. Why does it sound like that? Oh, because the attack was 0 milliseconds. Bring the makeup back. Yeah, I'm awful at compressing drums. Let's just play around with the presets. I don't hear much of a difference here. I just wanted to add a little bit more impulse at the beginning. Let me try one more time. Yeah, I'm not getting much mileage out of this. There we go. Meh. Okay, well, you can play with this for hours. I want to move on to a snare drum. So I'm going to rename this to be kick. Rename kick. There we go. And drop it in. I'm just going to do a really stupid 4 on the floor type thing. Just because it'll be easy. Let's just do like 100. Let's just do a kick, snare, maybe a hi-hat somewhere in the middle there, and we can play with it. Okay, so we have our kick drum. Let's add in a snare. So a snare will be created using that lo-fi mat and an envelope. And there are more sophisticated ways to make snares. You can look up sound design tutorials on how to make just about anything, and you can do it in just about any DAW. That actually reminds me. Well, I'll save that rant for another day. But anyway, let's just drop in our one sample waveform. Let's just start with the effects right off the bat. I don't think we need to do anything fancy with multiple FX tracks, so I'm just going to do it in one FX. Let's add a lo-fi mat and just kind of get right into business here. Mind your speakers when I do this. I don't know if you're listening to this on nice monitors, but that could be damaging. I don't know. I mean, I would imagine YouTube may apply some sort of post-processing filter. Let's add some noise. That's noisy. Ooh, that's loud. Okay, I'm not going to do that again until I have applied a DC offset device, auto DC, and I mean, this might be a little loud. I don't know. Yeah, that's super loud. Okay, sorry about that. Volume warning over. I'm not going to do much more of that. Let's apply an attack, or rather, and you know what? Maybe we don't want an 80 HSR. That's kind of silly. We should really just be using envelopes. I'm a dingus sometimes. So the way that an envelope will work, I'm just going to bring the volume down on this. There we go. So an envelope starts playing, and then as soon as it reaches this value here, it holds until you release the note, and then this is the fall off from that. So I don't want to have any sort of like note hold on my snare. I'm going to bring the volume back up a bit. I'm actually just going to apply a gainer. Where do we want to put that? Let's put that after the DC offset. I'm just going to bring this back to 0, and I'm going to bring the gainer down just a little bit so that it's not so loud. So note that our DC offset is doing a lot to help us remain around 0, but on that transient, on that initial pop, we do go positive. And that's not great for our, well, it can add up if we're not careful. If we play too many notes, we can actually saturate in one direction versus the other. So you'll notice if I turn off auto DC, we're always in the positive. So this isn't actually getting us much, but we'll just have to be careful about it. If you wanted to, you could actually manually change the DC offset. That's maybe actually a better thing to do. Notice how we're around 0. Oh, but that's garbage. As soon as the sample turns off, we go click back up to 0. Well, I'm just not going to deal with it yet. We'll turn on auto DC and just forget about it for now. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I digress. This already sounds a lot like a snare, but you know what makes it sound a lot more like a snare? A convolutional reverb. In Renoise 3.1, we now have a convolver with plenty of cool presets. This is mostly used for reverb effects, but you can also use it to, you know, make something sound different, right? Like as an effect. That's kind of what we're going to be doing here. See, that's more of a reverb. That's kind of starting to sound more like a snare. Whoa, that's a weird one. Boing. This is kind of cheating, actually, because we're just loading in a sample and we're changing, we're convolving that sample with our noise. It's not really pure synthesized snare at this point. You know what? No, that's cheating. Let's not do that. Let's make something that sounds really synthetic because we don't want to cheat. We could honestly call it right here, but as with everything, just throw an analog filter on it. Put a donk on it, you know? Ooh. Dirty. Okay, I'm going to call that my snare. So what do we want to do here? Nah. No. That's cute. These don't mesh very well together, but let's make a hi-hat. This shouldn't take too long. Let's rename this to snare. Hi-hat, hi-hat. Let's drop in the one sample. The one sample DC offset. Let's add another envelope in, and then we'll create an effects chain with just the lo-fi and a. What do we want to do? This might actually be sufficient, depending on how we do this. Ooh, that sounds cool. It's kind of like a wee woo. You hear that? It's very quiet. Could use that for something else. I think that has to do with the bit crunch. That's cool. Anyway. Oh boy, oh boy. Sorry about that. Bring the noise back down. That's way too long. And this is going to sound very similar to our snare, because ultimately a snare and a hi-hat are both kind of noise-based instruments. But I'm just going to change the envelope so that it's super tight in time. So it looks like this value here controls how long this window is, I think. Whoa. No, it doesn't. It controls where the current point is. All right. This controls how long the window is. All right, so we'll bring that down real nice and short, 256 milliseconds, and let's bring this down here. That's kind of hat-like. This is going to be very basic, folks. I am not super familiar with these synthesis of anything but kick drums. Kick drums I put a lot of time into learning how to do, but these guys are very, very basic for me. Let's drop an analog filter on it. Want something really nice and high. Okay, that's nice. That's a closed hat. I'm just going to duplicate. Well, first of all, I'm going to rename this to be closed hat. Let's make an open hat too. And I'm going to duplicate the instrument, and I'm going to rename it to open hat. And we're going to change the envelope on that. Not doing anything special, really. What do I think about that? There we go. So what I did there, I actually brought this bar back, which remember, as long as we're holding the key, the sample line will stay on that bar. And then when I release it, it goes to 0. So this is going to allow me to have the hat open and ringing for as long as I want, and then program via note off when the open hat turns off, instead of just controlling it via a volume, directly, or an envelope directly. So these are pretty similar. They're both a little bit quiet. I might bring the volume up on these guys a little bit. No need to overdo it though. It's very easy to bring these things up later. Okay, so let's add in a little hat sequence here. Let's kind of do a no particular reason why I'm using E. It's just where my finger is. Ooh, okay, let's move this up here. Bleh. Too many keys. Ooh, that sounds nice. Yeah, we'll do that. So I'm gonna hold Shift, Control C, move back up here, Control P, copy it all the way down. And I'm gonna add a note off here actually as well. Right, so I want this this hat to turn off when this other hat turns back on, because the idea is that we're playing an open and closed hat like on a drum set, and you can't have the open hat ringing while the other hat is playing closed. Like, just the logistics of that don't make sense. So because I want to take this block here and copy it down, I'm actually going to move the off back up to the top here. And I'm going to copy that, and then that pattern will actually tile by pressing Control P. Again, Control P is paste continuously, as opposed to just Control V, which is paste once. Now this pattern will loop. Looking cool. So now I'm just going to apply some EQ. Call this kick. Snare, closed hat, open hat. Okay, let's make a group for everything that's not the kick for reasons. I think that there's a lot of quite high spectral content here. It's not bad, actually. I'd like to extend this out a little. Actually, let's add a duck to this. Oh, right, it's not called duck. We're going to use a signal follower on the kick. Have this thing follow bass. And run this into a Hydra. Oops. I'm going to try this with a compressor, right? It's cross-chain compression, not cross-chain gain. Let's try this with a compressor. I have not tried that. I'll use a bus compressor because I'm more familiar with that. Let's do limiter soft, and then I think that which value here? There's the threshold. Okay, let's try that. So the signal follower here will go to perk, compressor, threshold. Oh boy. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I actually don't think that ducking is going to sound particularly good here. So let's not actually do any ducking right now. Oh, also I completely forgot to run this into the Hydra. My bad. Stay on the current track. Hydra input. So what else would sound good? Let's apply a verb. Actually, I like to do... So, okay, this is one thing to talk about. You can add a verb in a track, a reverb, directly. So now this is going to have a nice reverby sound to it because we've got the wet mix, which is the verb itself, plus the dry mix, which is the original like sound that's going into it. If we turn off the dry mix, it's just the verb part. Now, this is a cool way to do that, but you could have potentially a different reverb on each track, and they would all have different like durations, and it might end up sounding a little bit muddy. So the way that I tend to do verb is a more traditional way to do it via a send track. So I'm going to put verb, my reverb in here, and I'm going to actually turn, let's just choose a fun preset, Cavern Cool. I'm going to turn off the dry mix because I don't want any dry sound to pass through this, and instead of adding a reverb in here, I'm going to add a send. And I'm going to keep the source this time because my dry mix is going to come from this track, and it's also sending to this verb send track over here, and that's getting mixed into the master automatically. Ooh, let's duck the verb. That could be cool. Let's add a bounciness to the verb here, and I think we can maybe do that via the wet mix. Let me just. No. I think we need to actually put a gainer on the end here. From 0. We'll go from like, well, yeah, back here. Verb, gainer, gain. We'll go from 0, or rather from, at a maximum value, we want this to be actually negative INF. Wait, that's the opposite of what we wanted. I'll just reverse it. Although I will say it sounds cool. You know, you might choose to go with this, right? Sounds pretty neat. This isn't quite what I wanted. There it is. Let's see here. Let's bring down the low cut. Nah, I liked it better. Okay, and that's just about it, right? That's basically, let's apply some EQing. A little bit quiet, but we can add a It's actually good to have your mix be quiet as you're developing it and then make everything louder, like as you go on. You don't want to start with everything very, very loud and then go from there. Not only will your ears get tired, but your mix will get saturated very quickly. So yeah, that's drums. So this was 40 minutes. That's not so bad. Drums in 40 minutes. That's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now. Bye. So also, I lied. I'm gonna play with this a little bit more because as I was closing this down, I remembered that we made some macros. Just listen to how this kick drum sounds when we play with these macros. This is kind of where we left off. Oh my god, I'm gonna bring this up to 130. Ah! That's so cool. Let's add a macro in here. Controlling kick, yeah. Just because I'm a sucker for it, I'm going to add some distortion. This is going to sound so cool. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Too much. Maybe a little bit. I'll stop playing with this. I can't help myself. Good night.